Morning, guys. This is Canine Freedom interview number 11, and it's with my friend Lauren Turner. And she, little backstory was I met her at a conference last year, and sort of what she just told me just now on how I met her was just I just went up and said hi because someone here doesn't like to make small talk. And yeah, she's really cool, and I just want well, let's give her a chance to introduce herself. So, Lauren, why don't you tell us where you're at, what's your business name, and what you specialize in, and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, Kevin, I know we just talked about this before we went live, but I met you at conference, the IACP conference last year. And I am a social person once I get to know people. And so lunch times is like classic middle school for me, where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to pick somebody to sit next to, and I don't know how to know anybody. And so I just sat down at this table, and I think you came up and you just sat down and started talking, and I was like, this is awesome because I don't have to come up with the small talk. So it was great, and we've just kept in contact since, and it's been great. So yeah, so for everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Lauren Turner. I am the owner and trainer of Ideal Dog, and I'm in Navarre, Florida, which is super northwest Florida panhandle. I joke that we're basically Alabama, and it would be funny if it wasn't actually true. Like, we're basically Alabama. I specialize primarily in pet dog training. I love learning theory. If anybody checks my Facebook, social media, my website, like, my focus is how can we take learning theory and directly apply it to dog training to make it as efficient and clear to the dog as possible. I also really care about dog nutrition, which is what we're going to talk about today, because to me, it is the missing link in a lot of people's training programs. And I know we'll talk more in depth about that. So, quick
Mhm.
disclaimer, I am not a certified canine nutritionist. I do not have a veterinary background. So all of the information I talk about comes from the perspective of me being super passionate about the topic. I have a few online certifications, but I just want to make clear to everybody, this is just my passion. This is something I read about, I dig into. I love reading the science, but I do not have, a nutrition certification to my name. So always throw that disclaimer out there because these are all my opinions based off my experience and my research.
Yeah, well, I had a bit of a sample when I had to talk to her about my fat chihuahua that's on the bed right now. So it's pretty, it's pretty, it's pretty legit, and I wouldn't have noticed the difference between that and nutritionist. So good on you, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks.
And
And Ahi back there is getting fat shamed when in reality he's like just a smidge, a tiny bit pudgy, which for a little dog, is the difference of like losing 1 pound, which is like 20% of his whole body weight. So poor Ahi, we love you. Don't feel bad. Yeah,
yeah,
so we talked
he's used
last
to
week
it.
about how to, yeah, you definitely did get a sample of my passion, so to speak. We went through the whole gamut of things we'll touch on today, and just sort of talked about how to help Ahi lose that little 1 pound while making sure that he gets all of the nutrition and calories he needs per day.
Hmm. No, like Lauren, like I know we kind of talked about this like before, but just for the viewers, um, just like how important is it with nutrition with dogs, like because I know we talked about how it can affect them physically and mentally, especially since most most pet owners are feeding the dogs kibble like breakfast and dinner. There's no like variety, and it's always just like that single flavor and all those things. So like, what are your thoughts about just that in general with their diet?
Yeah, so pet nutrition in general to me is foundational in helping the dog in any way, shape, or form. So, whatever issue the dog is having, if there are issues at all, and for people who
Hmm.
don't have behavioral issues, to me, the nutrition is that 1 to 2% change in improvement in their dog. So, if you have a champion dog in whatever sport, if you're looking for that 1 to 2% improvement, sometimes it can be the nutrition. But for the average dog owner who generally has a list of 1 or 2 things that they want to improve, to me, nutrition can help be that boost to speed along the learning or to just make the dog feel better in general so that they can perform better. And to tie this back into the science, which is what I love to do, because what is anything if it isn't back to the science? It's just my, ridiculous opinion. So to tie it back to the science, I know I always think about Maslow's hierarchy. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is or isn't familiar with it, Maslow's hierarchy is a pyramid. You can Google it to get the visual. And it is ranking the physical, physiological, and psychological importance of things that this a human needs. This was built for a human psychological pyramid. At the bottom are physical and physiological needs that the human needs before they can achieve the things at the higher levels. So at the bottom, the very, very bottom, you have things like uh, food, water, shelter, I think are the main 3 things at the bottom. And if you don't have food, water, shelter, the human isn't going to be prepared to achieve these things on the higher part of the pyramid. Things like self fulfillment, self actualization, being an entrepreneur and reaching your dreams. That's at the top of the pyramid. But somebody who's hungry, who's starving, who doesn't have a home, who is constantly living day to day to day to meet those needs, isn't prepared to self actualize or become the thing that they truly want to be in life. And so that's the science. And we can translate that to dog training as well. And this is a visual I give all of my clients before we start training. This is how I define my training in general is at the very bottom, just like humans, dogs have to have their basic needs met before we can focus on directly fixing behavioral issues. So, whatever issues your dog has, pulling on leash, reactivity on leash, peeing in the house, digging, chewing, jumping, all of the stuff that pet dogs tend to do, all of those frustrating things. To me, the best way to indirectly attack those problems is by starting at the bottom of the pyramid, by addressing what is the dog eating? Where is the dog living? Does the dog feel safe? And if you have an anxious dog, the answer is no, the dog doesn't feel safe. There's no way you can start training, which is up here on the pyramid, before fixing this on the bottom. And so for dogs who do feel safe, your average happy-go-lucky dog who's just sort of a bit bananas in the house, the first thing that we need to do, in my opinion, is address what the dog is eating and making sure that it's something that is healthy, is fresh, is something the dog can digest easily, is something that the nutrients are accessible to the dog in an easy way, and that's called bioavailability, the ability of the dog to actually extract the nutrients from that food. And once we address that, once the dog is now feeling good because they're eating better, now we can move up the pyramid and address things like the dog's jumping and the dog pulling, is the dog getting enough exercise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the way up to the top of the pyramid, which is competing in the obedience or agility ring and winning a bunch of titles. That's at the top. Or for the average pet dog owner, you know, going to a park, going to the pet store and having the dog walk nicely on the leash next to you without being a butthead, basically,
Yep.
which a lot of pet dogs are. So that's how I look at nutrition. Is it something that needs to be addressed before we talk about my dog is biting the leash. I don't want to say me because I don't do a whole lot of aggression work on purpose, but my dog's reactive and acting a fool on leash. Before we can even talk about how to teach the dog to heel, before we can talk about leash pressure, we must make sure the dog feels good physically by feeding them something good. And that brings me to another point where this is sort of what triggered my passion is I was getting a lot of dogs in for training. I do board and trains and private lessons. And anytime I would meet with a new dog, probably, I mean, at least 2/3 of the dogs were on some sort of medication that had to do with skin issues, ear issues, poop issues, anal gland issues, like all of these sort of just chronic irritations. And to me, that goes back to the pyramid where we can't start training if the dog doesn't feel good in the first place. So that started all of my research. That started all of my digging to figure out, what was going on. All of my poor dogs have been like my experimentation platform for a bunch of
Oh,
different types of food.
what dog
They
trainer does not have a dog to experiment on? Like, do you get the one
exactly.
dog that you're gonna be used as the guinea
Thank
pig for the
goodness.
most
Yeah, exactly. Like, thank goodness we have our own dogs. Otherwise, our clients would be the experiment.
part? You're
Uh,
right.
so
Yeah, but no, for sure. Hold on. Like Adrian says hi. She said hi, guys. What's up,
I
Adrian? And then my best friend that I was telling you about that was interested with this. She just tuned in.
Oh, perfect.
She said she sees a complete difference in the performance of her clients' dogs that eat a biological appropriate diet versus starchy processed food. Awesome. Good to have you on,
Exactly.
Carrie. But yeah, no, it really makes sense just because yeah, I mean, it's basically the same thing with humans because it's like if you want an Beijing Olympic athlete to go compete, you're not going to give him McDonald's for like 3 months straight.
Exactly.
And
Right.
I mean, we also feel good depending on what we eat, like just and just varying up the stomach, just making our stomachs a little bit more resilient, just eating different things, and then just figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Whereas like the dog, we only have time for just like the one bag of dog food, and then we just give him that his whole life. Like honestly, I think I imagine myself eating either cereal for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or just like a bland like rice and maybe corn for fiber or things like that, And then I can only
Yeah.
imagine. And then, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, you hit the nail on the head. That is the analogy I use for people because I never want this conversation, whether it's here with colleagues and clients or with my clients in general. I never want the conversation to feel condescending or judgmental or anything like that because when it comes down to it, people just don't know what to feed their dog. If you go
Hmm.
on Google, you will find opinions anywhere from feed your dog this scientifically crafted kibble, this single bag of kibble for its whole life, to know your dog is a wolf and you need to raise your own homegrown, organically raised, never antibiotic chickens and just feed them a whole chicken every day. And
Hmm.
that's the healthiest thing to do. Like the spectrum is all over the place. And so, at least for my clients, they are trying to do the best they can with the information that they can find. But bottom line is the information is not out there in a way that's easy for the average person to understand because a large majority of the information is just marketing. Just like many products, if you just Google, best dog food, you're going to get bombarded with opinions basically from the pet food manufacturers. on why their food is the best, but you can't find the objective information on what is the best to be able to compare it. So that's sort of the perspective that I come at things with when it comes to my clients is I know that information is hard to find, so let me help you navigate this world because I have spent a really long time reading dog food labels and reading the science that I can find and reading books on the topic so that my clients don't have to, you know. So, yeah, to go back to the analogy you gave, that's exactly what I tell people is despite your best efforts, a lot of kibble on the market is the equivalent of taking a young child and feeding them Fruit Loops, which is fortified with vitamins and minerals. You know, it's good stuff. You know, feeding
Yep.
them two bowls of cereal a day with a Flintstones vitamin on the side because we know cereal doesn't meet the daily nutritional requirements for a toddler. But if you add that Flintstones vitamin right next to the cereal, they probably on paper are going to meet a huge portion of their daily requirements, especially now. I'm kind of making this up, but like Fruit Loops with added protein is probably a thing. And if it's not Fruit Loops, there's probably like Frosted Flakes with added protein, you know? So on paper, that could be meeting the daily nutritional requirements for that child. And so you could say it's completely balanced for the kid. But we all know that poor kid in school isn't going to be behaving well. They're probably going to be the kid who can't sit still in their chair. They're probably hitting all their friends. They have to go to the principal's office, you know, every other day. And they're just not doing well behaviorally in school, even though you probably know the kid has all the potential in the world. And so you would hope that somebody would sit those parents down and be like, hey, you know, maybe we should change the kids' diet. And then you'll see positive changes in the kid's life, in their ability to focus, in their ability to learn, in their ability to control their emotions and their
That,
impulsive
that's
behaviors.
so funny.
Because
I
that's
almost think
exactly what
I'm
what we
almost
saw.
thinking like that'd be more. I'd be thinking that's my high school. That's like I know a couple of classmates. I'm just like I just want to ask them now. It's like you. It's like do you guys have a bad diet? Were your parents not feeding you at high school? I mean
Right,
our lunch food our food during lunch was like alright, but I don't think that was the big issue. But that's funny.
right. Yeah,
But
most
yeah
lunches do have to meet some sort of standard, depending on the
yeah.
state and what regulations are there. But they do. But you think about most kids, and they wake up and they grab a Pop Tart or a piece of toast on their way out, or like the cool thing when I went to high school were toaster strudels. Like those were the cool things. So
Hmm.
that's what people ate, and that's probably worse than a bowl of Fruit Loops. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
No.
give to my
I.
clients. And I think it helps them understand, it at least opens them up to the idea that they should give more thought as to what they should feed their dog. Because a lot of times we sort of just make a decision based on what the vet recommended, what the breeder recommended, or sort of what bag of food looked the best, that you made sure had some meat in it when you flip it over. That's kind of the average standard by which most people evaluate their foods and make a decision for their dogs. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I worked at Petco for 3 years, and then it was just like the classical marketing of like which is the best brand or who's paying us the who which brand is paying us the most to promote those things. Like, oh hey, like first year was like Blue Buffalo, then the other one was like wellness and other things, and we're just spouting like things, like oh it's healthier because it's better for your dog because it's grain free, or it's like hey this is limited protein and all of that. And then so it's just like, yeah, I mean, there's so many different brands of dog food, and then it's like we we people in general have a hard time looking at a big menu, ordering something at a restaurant. Then it's just like ordering something for your dog. It's like, holy crap, what is like you need puppy food? Okay, which puppy food out of like 100 brands? And you know,
exactly.
people go for like cheap brands like pure like pedigree or like Beneful and all that. And I have a client's dog. Well, kind of client foster dog who's gonna be here for a while. He was eating Beneful for like his whole time, and then we I changed him to like a sport like Purina sport plan, pro plan, and it's like
Mhm.
and a little bit of and some fresh food for dinner, and he looks good. He's a little he's in between because when we first got him he was like super skinny, but and then I dropped down his food because he's a little chunky, but he looks good now and he feels a lot better. And he did have issues where he's like um didn't wasn't good with strangers when they come over and just dog reactive and all that. And just the diet thing helped just because if I have an upset stomach, I'm probably not going to be in a good mood or just not in a good state of mind. So I can only imagine with the dog. And
Right.
there's just so many choices, and it's just insane. And by the way, guys, feel free to just shoot us any questions right now, and we'll try our best to not get lost in the conversation to answer you guys. But let's see. I got one client here. Hey,
Sure.
Christina. I think digestion is a big issue with my dog. He just doesn't eat. I love to get him eating with gusto. She has a chocolate Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, like it's a chocolate covered, sorry, colored. Wow, I like made it
I knew
sound
what
like
you meant.
I was just like, oh god. All right,
Yeah.
and then let's see.
Yeah.
Curious about
Okay.
feelings
So,
on pickcorn. What is that? What
yeah,
is pick?
Christina, I'm not familiar with, I'm assuming that's a brand of food.
Let me
So,
look
what I
that up
usually
real
tell
quick.
people, yeah, if you can look it up, usually what I need to just give a quick opinion on a food is what type of food is it? Are we talking dry food, cooked food, raw food? Like what is it? And then what are the ingredients? Are sort of the two first things I want to know. And then also if there's a statement on there saying they meet AFCO requirements or something on there about being complete in balance. That's sort of my main three things I need to
Oh, I
review.
think from what I'm looking at, it seems to be, it's a it's a book for like guide for natural health for dogs and cats. So it's like
Okay. I would have to dig
so
through a
it's a
little
book.
bit. Yeah, I'd have to dig through a little bit. There are a lot of, oh, okay, a dog feeding guru, she said. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with him, and I'm going to be completely honest. There are a lot of vets popping up that now are coming out with their own brands of food, which I think is great because that means the conversation is shifting to what food can I go buy from Petco to hey, what's something better that I can feed my dog? Something fresher, something more bioavailable. And people
Yeah.
want to be better by their dogs. I think that's awesome that the conversation is shifting that way, but I don't know him in particular. And again, the things that I want to see when anybody comes out with pet food is I want to know the ingredients. I want to know essentially the science behind it. What's in it? How can you prove that that's actually what's in it? And does it meet the daily nutritional requirements that the dog needs? And those are outlined. Anybody can Google it and look up National Research Council feeding guidelines for dogs. It actually has cats in there too, but look for dogs. There's two categories: the growth and reproduction, so that's for puppies and pregnant mothers, dog mothers, and then everybody else. So just the maintenance phase, so adult dogs, etc., etc. So I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with him, but in general, you asked earlier about the digestion issues. Digestion is, I mean, when you take all eating issues and break it down, it comes down to digestion issues. You know, something about either the food itself is making it hard for the dog to digest, or there's something internal to the dog that isn't working properly that makes it so the food is unable to digest. So there's an internal and an external consideration you have to have. In my experience, for most dogs, it's a combination of the two, where the food is difficult to digest for the dog, and the dog system has been grinding and trying to process this difficult food for so long that now it has inflammation and it has issues that we need to address in order for it to run more efficiently again. And the example I give for that is you drive your car every single day to work, but you never get the oil changed, like you're gonna see some negative side effects from that. So you've got to take it to the shop and probably, I don't know anything about cars, so this is this is as detailed as my analogy is gonna get, but like I assume if you don't change your oil in your car, there's gonna be other things that have been affected because of that, because it wasn't taken care of properly. So not only will you have to change the oil, but now you sort of have to work through a few other things that broke down along the
Now
way.
you're reminding me to change my car's oil. Like my dad was yelling at me the other day, like you need to get it oiled. It's like almost 3,000 mileage, and I'm just like, okay. Now you totally reminded me.
When my oil doesn't get changed, like there's always this sticker on the dash, or the front window, and
Yep.
when it goes over even a little bit, like I feel like my husband is watching me and being like, change the oil. That's not the case. He never says anything about it, but I just like feel that. I'm like, I need to get the oil changed to get it done.
Oh
Uh,
man.
so Christina had another issue. I don't know if you want to pull that up. Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Well, go ahead if you want to read it out. That's fine.
yeah. I said, well, let's see. Hey, what's up, Martin? And then say she asked, do you encourage raw feeding? Well, you go ahead first. I only feed. I just feed as a student. I don't feed as a nutritionist. So it's like you go ahead and answer that question.
Okay. So yes and no. Isn't that always a dog trainer answer? It depends. So my main rule for feeding dogs is you must feed the dog in front of you. Okay, so that's rule number one. There are textbook rules that'll say, the science will say this, this, and this. But when it comes down to it, if you follow those rules and your dog is not doing well, then it's not good for your dog. So every dog's solution is going to be a little bit different. In general, the fresher the dog food, and by fresher I mean the food has been processed the least. It's been subjected to heat the least. It's been subjected to mixing and mashing and crushing the least. And the food that has, yeah, just in general, let's say the least amount of processing is going to retain more nutrients and resemble the original form of the food on a molecular level better. So the more you process food, the more that it's been subjected to heat and mixing and mashing, the less nutrients that are going to be available. And you can look that up online. This isn't some like mythological, ooh, the vitamins have been damaged. You can look up what vitamins and minerals uh, become damaged when subjected to just sort of disfiguration by mixing and mashing, being subjected to the sunlight, being subjected to air, and being subjected to heat. There's all different things that can damage stuff. And I think a quick example is probiotics. A lot of people will go buy probiotics, from wherever. And a lot of them, once opened, need to stay in the refrigerator, especially if it's in some sort of powder form, not in a capsule. If it's in a capsule, it's more shelf stable because they're protecting it from the air and the heat and the sunlight. And a lot of them come in darkened jars as well too. All of that is an attempt to protect those little bugs that are in there. And it's the same thing for food. So lots of things can be damaged due to high amounts of processing. So for that reason, I do like raw feeding. However, it still must be a balanced formula. So we go back to what does the dog need to eat on a daily basis? What macronutrients, so protein, fat, carbohydrates, and what micronutrients, which is all the vitamins and minerals, what do they need to eat on a daily basis in order to survive? Okay, so that's important to recognize is the standards are set for the dogs to survive, they're not going to keel off, in a quick manner after eating the food for a certain period of time. But so long as the raw food is fresh, we can trust its ingredients, we trust the way it was processed and stored and sent to us, and we can trust the way that we're using it, and it is complete and balanced, then it's something that I do encourage people to eat because it's the freshest form of the food. The dog's system is going to be able to digest that the easiest. It's the most bioavailable form of the food. And again, that's, does the body recognize what's being put into it, and can it process that easily, basically? So that's like, synthetic oil versus your real oil. This is not synthetic food, so the analogy isn't perfect, but
It's
that's what that
okay. It's okay. Most of the people will understand. I'm sure someone's gonna correct us about oil, like in one of the, like
yeah,
eventually. But yeah, no, I
it's
mean,
fine.
I love. Yeah, it's fine. I hope your husband isn't watching, because I can imagine he's just gonna point this out. Yeah,
He knows a lot
yeah,
about
no,
ours, so
that's good. Yeah, no, I mean, I love raw diet. I mean, I went from like feeding uh Costco dog food to my Belgian Malinois, and her poops were huge. Her fur was a little bit. It could be a little bit cleaner, and I switched her up to raw, and the difference is really cool. She looks great. Her coat's like super shiny. I mean, like 4 out of 5 dogs are on raw, even the Chihuahua, and like their coats are clean, teeth are clean. And the one thing I appreciate the most is that the poops are like tiny. They are just so small, because it's just like I only need to use like, well, probably except the lab who eats poop, but like for most of the for like I can get all those dogs and pick up their poop with like one poop bag, versus like if they ate kibble and I'm going to have to use like 2 or 3 bags to pick that
yes.
stuff up, just because they can digest so much more of that raw diet versus like kibble. And so like how you talked about with those probiotics, like kibble, it's like it's supposed to last like us like for 20 years or so, but as soon as you open that bag, then the oxygen starts to kick in, and we put in like bins. It just makes such a big, it just drastically drops how long that food will last. And then um
Hmm.
like kibble like really dehydrates the dog, especially if it's like summer, and like with this weird climate of ours, the heat, it doesn't really help. um and I was like, were you at the conference at 2017, or was it last year? Was your first conference?
Yeah, last year was the first time I went, even though the
Oh,
year before was right in my neck of the woods. So that was
right.
great. For
Yeah, because I went to the St. Louis one as my first conference, and like it was like Karen Becker and Rodney Habib. It was more
oh
Rodney Habib made that converse had the had his presentation about canine nutrition hacks and all that, and it was just amazing how back in like the 1900s dogs lived for like 20ish years or things like that. And then like as we get more advanced, the like our dog's lifespan starting to go like decline. And he would just talk
Mhm.
about like how there's the world's three world's longest living cats, and like the one 21 year old healer. And they would just talk about like, what's your secret? And he's like, oh, I just give him some fresh food, I just give him some grass fed milk, or like I gave him some of my food. And then it just makes such a
Yeah,
big difference, where it's like most dogs will last maybe less than 15 years or something. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. And just the fact, like I've told all my clients about this, because kibble, you have to make it like the shape and all that, and just process. There's like a lot of starch, which feeds insulin, which insulin helps create cancer, and it just makes one big mess of things. So it's just you 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 really gotta know what you're feeding your dog. You gotta really know what really works for them. Um and I started off with I started off with kibble. Then I was a little skeptical with raw because most of the people are just like, oh, what if your dog gets sick from salmonella, or like, what's he gonna do with this and this? And I just started off like part time kibble, then part time raw. Then I did more raw, and then it was just like I had so much fun just customizing what she would eat. Like I would throw sardines, I would throw a turkey neck with that, and then like for me it's so complicated just figuring out the percentages and things. I'd rather just go and get like the formulated, get it from like a good brand, and
Exactly.
no,
Yeah.
and like I know one or two people that are just like, oh, here's a chicken thigh, that's your raw diet. I'm just like, no, that's not complete at
Yeah.
all.
Exactly. So for me, when we talk about, in my opinion, like what's best and what's worst to feed a dog, in when we're talking about types of dog food, kibble versus canned versus raw versus cooked, all of this sort of stuff. The worst thing, in my opinion, that you could ever feed your dog is something that's unbalanced, something that you cannot confidently state meets the daily nutritional requirements for the dog. And unfortunately, it comes down to people who feed an unbalanced diet usually are very well-meaning people. There are people who just don't care, and they just don't want the dog to die, so they'll chuck them a few things. But the people who go on Pinterest, who go on Google, who try to find these recipes for their dogs are really, really, really trying to do right by their dogs. And so I have to gently, so kindly explain the importance of the food being balanced. And the great thing is, for people who want to make their dogs food, like, it's easy to find the recipes out there. Qualification, it's easy to find recipes out there. It's also easy to take the additional step to make sure that those recipes are complete and balanced. So speaking of Dr. Becker, Dr. Karen Becker works closely with Rodney and so far as just teaching people about dog nutrition, but she has a recipe book out there. Narelle Cook of Natural Health for People and Pets, she has a recipe, a few, I think she has a full book out now. I know there's
Oh, that's cool.
PDF cards that you can buy online, and it's literally what you would expect for anybody who's interested in making their dog's foods. You can buy one of those two things. There's plenty more out there. Those are two I just know off the top of my head you can trust. And it's just a recipe card, just like you're making a pie for yourself, except it's weirder ingredients. It'll say, ground beef and so many ounces of ground beef and a teaspoon of butter and a chicken heart, and I'm just making this up, this isn't a real recipe, but it'll say each meal the dog should have this stuff. And then of course you can multiply it, make it in bulk, and then just portion it out per meal for the dog. It takes a lot of work, like, make no mistake that takes commitment. You have to source the ingredients yourself, you have to chop it up, you have to weigh it all. You have to make sure you're doing it correctly. But for anybody interested in feeding raw, that is the most cost effective way to do it because nobody's doing it for you. You can source your own food and you're putting in all the effort to do that. Whereas if you buy commercial, you're sacrificing you're getting the convenience of it being pre-made, and for that you have to pay more for it. The price goes up when convenience goes up. They're directly related.
Yep.
So
Yep. And you brought a good point because, yeah, you brought a good point because a lot of people just want convenience and, low cost just because, I mean, you have kids. It costs a fortune just to feed those guys and just like school and everything, and just you're taking care of yourself. And then like I know, like when I tell people about the process, like, oh, I gotta weigh the dog's food, I gotta portion it out, I gotta like make sure it's not too much organ, too much boner here, things like that. People are just like, oh, that's a lot of work, I don't want that, and they just rather just
right.
get kibble and just
And
throw it on
fortunately for
there.
those, yeah, fortunately for those people, there are in between options out there. That's something that I really try to stress to people is it's not kibble or weighing out the chicken liver. Okay, there's a
Hmm.
million options in between, all with benefits and drawbacks to each decision. So there are options out there where you feed a base formula and add your own protein. That's usually called base of some sort. Volhard Dog Nutrition is what I personally feed. It's what I like. Honest Kitchen is another brand that has a base and you add your own protein. And I think Dr. Marty's has one.
Yep.
All
Yep. I
the
have it.
Okay, yeah. So Dr. Marty's, I haven't looked at in the past few months. Last time I looked, this brand came to mind, but I don't necessarily endorse it right now. I
Hmm.
don't think it's complete and balanced. So
Mm.
hold that thought. But the point is, there are a lot of brands out there where you don't have to worry about the food being complete and balanced yourself. All you do is feed, for example, half a scoop of the powder, add water, and add fresh protein of your choice. And then so that's still, depending on the brand, considered raw because you're putting the raw protein on top. And usually the ingredients are very, very lightly processed. So it's still considered raw for the most part. Then there are options, that are out there where going a little bit further up in cost at this point, but dehydrated, freeze dried, air dried food is all extremely convenient. It's also shelf stable because all the moisture has been drawn out of the food in one way, shape, or another, but it's lightly processed. And depending on the brand, sometimes the meat is cooked before it's added and dehydrated, and sometimes it's not. So you sort of have to do a little investigating depending on what your goals are for feeding your dog. But those are extremely convenient. All you do is put it in a bowl, add water, keep it in your pantry. So that's another option. And a huge sort of burgeoning sector of the pet food market is a sector called the cooked pet foods, which you see it in Target and stuff. The fresh pet rolls, those are
Hmm.
all cooked foods that have less preservatives, has fresher ingredients. You can read the ingredients and say, oh, this kind of sounds like a Thanksgiving dinner I would eat myself. So people like that, and that's a huge sort of new sector coming out. And that again is still less processed than your more traditional types of food like kibble and canned and all of those sorts of things because I'm speaking generally here. Usually the ingredients have only been cooked once. So it's the equivalent of our dinners that we cook, in the oven or a skillet or a pressure cooker in general. So that's, relatively lightly processed. And that's a really good option for people who want to feed fresh. They want to look at the food and say, see, I recognize these ingredients in here. I feel comfortable feeding this, but I don't have to worry about, I call it the yuck factor, the yuck factor of feeding raw ingredients because you know, I know you feed a form of food that comes in like giant sausage rolls, I think.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah. Like the 5 pound chubs.
Yeah, that's like a super turn off for a lot of people. And I don't blame them. It's weird, it's gross, it's messy. You have to thaw it and chop it and do all this stuff to it. So I get it. People sometimes aren't ready for that, or they may be immunocompromised, have somebody in the family who's immunocompromised, have a dog who's immunocompromised. And for those reasons, raw food may not be an option, or anything that's semi
Hmm.
uncooked. So those are all sort of different options. You can feed pure raw, like we were talking about before, buying it yourself or making it yourself. You can feed like the next step down, where there's a base formula, add your own raw toppers on top. You can feed something that's totally raw, but all the moisture is then sucked out. Realize that the cost of that is like through the roof. Ahi would be perfectly fine to eat an air dried, dehydrated food because he'd get like one little pellet a day and he would be good to go. And then,
Oh, the
yeah,
torture.
dude, same thing. I say like little dogs are the cheapest to feed because you can feed them the most gourmet, custom tailored food, and it's a few cents more than the kibble. you were feeding, you know, because they just get
Right.
1 tablespoon of food a day and it's so sweet.
I know.
So,
Versus like
so for
I
anybody out there, there's lots of options to feed.
I know there was like at the beginning when I first fed raw to my Malinois, it was one of my friends who fed raw was like saying she did the whole math with like how much she should eat twice a day, but but she told me a pound, and then I thought it was a pound twice a day, and so I ended up feeding this dog like 2 pounds a day, and then my roommate saw me, she's like, "Damn, this dog eats a lot," and I'm like, "Is this not how she's is this not how much she's supposed to eat?" She's like, "No, she's supposed to eat like 10 ounces, not the whole
Uh,
pound." Oh, pound for the whole day. And I was just like,
yeah,
and then she started to lose a little bit. I was like, okay, that makes more sense. And I was just like, versus this Chihuahua, that's like, I bought a small soul feeder bowl for him, and I just, one little spoonful of his raw food, and that's it. I'm just like, wow, I could,
it's pitiful.
it's so sad. But I was just like, this is all it takes versus you dogs that are like, I have three
Oh
dogs that
god.
eat like 8 to 10 ounces each, and I'm just like, all right,
Yeah, so
take
my
all my
golden
money.
retriever, yeah, he's young relatively. He's gonna be 4 in December. He's 90. I'm trying to get him to 95 pounds. That's a good weight for him. He's slightly under right now. But he
Hmm.
eats, if I feed fresh raw food, like commercial raw, he eats 2 pounds a day. So anybody who's familiar with Answer's pet food, it comes in 2 pound rolls. He gets the whole thing the whole day. And it's very harsh on my budget. Let me say that. I joke that the only reason I train dogs, that income that I make, sends my kid to school, feeds my dogs and gets them their vet trips, and allows me to go to conferences. Like that's where my money goes. I don't make a whole lot of money.
I'm pretty sure that's gonna be most of the dog trainers out there. Just like the reason I charge you so much is because I need to feed my dogs, and it's
Right.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to
Thank
pay
goodness
rent
my
and my
husband
dogs.
works. Yeah. Thank goodness my husband works so I can uh you know, I'm just thankful that I do have the ability to feed them whatever I want. And that goes back to raw feeding or feeding uber fresh food is not something that everybody can do. And I totally accept that. That's why this conversation with my clients, with anybody who's listening, it's not free feed fresh raw food or you're a terrible dog owner. That's not the conversation whatsoever. It's I want people to come away with the ability to be confident about what choice they have made for their dog to eat. So if I bump into somebody one day and I say, hey, why do you feed your dog this food? I want them to be able to say, oh, I feed this food because it has X, Y, and Z ingredients. My dog's poop looks good. His energy level is stable throughout the day. His fur looks good. His teeth look good. It fits within my budget and it fits within my lifestyle, and I'm comfortable with the ingredients that it has because of these reasons. You know, if somebody can give me like a solid statement like that that just shows they've thought through the process, that's awesome. That's all I want people to come away with when I'm done, you know, doing a diet consultation or any dog who has trained with me. I want the owners to be able to do that because everybody's decision at the end of the day on what to feed their dog is completely different. Excuse me. Everybody has a different lifestyle, different budget, different goals for their dogs, and their dogs are uniquely biologically different from each other. So the solution is not going to be the same for every
Hmm.
dog. So, I think that's important. Is yeah, it feeding my dog. So my 90-pound golden, my little 50-pound border collie who eats like she's 70 pounds. And then we have a mutt who's like 45 pounds. He's getting older, so he doesn't eat quite as much. But those dogs cost a lot of money to feed the way that I feed. And that's something that I'm willing to prioritize because I believe in the benefits and I see the benefits on a day to day basis. But that's not something that everybody can prioritize, and that's fine. So if you
Yeah,
want, we
no,
can talk
I
about sort of, my uh, like rules, so to speak, or tips for people who can't feed anything other than kibble or are currently not able to feed anything other than kibble, and sort of how to fix that up a little bit, if that's something you want to talk about.
oh yeah, no, definitely. Like right, yeah, I mean, I totally hear you. I mean, my roommate has a Labrador Retriever. She's like about 60 pounds, 65-ish pounds. She has an ACL tour, so she's recovering from a surgery right now. And then she has a pity, then she has a blue nose pity. Then I have that foster dog, and then I have the Chihuahua and the Belgian Malinois, and four of them eat raw. So it, my dogs, it's worth, I'm, is worth it. They're happy, and it's like if you as you have as long as you know the pattern, you know how to do it right, then it's gonna be easy. It's mindless at this point. Like and
Right.
all and for like dinner, like if I know we going for like a walk or we went hiking off leash, or if we did like a big day like training or helping me with clients or things like that, I'll add something special to their food, whether it's like cottage cheese
Mhm.
or like berries for antioxidants, and or just something special. Maybe a bit of a cheat day with a little bit of wet food with my foster dog's kibble or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you there
Yeah.
were a couple of things you presented that can supercharge the kibble, or just like some healthy options to add the food. So like, why did you go ahead? Well, let's talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, so before I touch on that, you hit on something that I do like mentioning is there is a huge learning curve. If somebody is transitioning from feeding kibble to feeding, let's just say, completely raw, or honestly anything other than taking a food and dumping it in the bowl, there's a
Hmm.
learning curve, and you have to consciously take time to think about your dog's food instead of, hey, can you feed the dog, scoop the food, plop it in the bowl. You've got to think about where are you going to store the food, because most of the time it needs a refrigerator or a freezer. Do you have the space for that? I had a client who I trained their dog for 28 days. They were board and trained. The dog stayed with me. And our sole focus was preparing this dog to move from suburbia, Florida, to literally smack dab in the middle of New York City. And fortunately, it was a German Shepherd, did fantastic. I was so proud of this dog. I don't think prior to that dog, I would have ever met a dog that I looked at and was like, man, you were just made for city living. But after training that dog, he was made for city living. He had the temperament for it. He had just the drives for it. His drive was to be with his family, and great, because that's what you're going to be doing in New York City, is being very, very, very close with your family. But anyway, he transitioned to a raw diet in the form of a base formula, a powder base with raw on top. He transitioned to full hard dog nutrition. And that was a logistical consideration we had to talk through with the owners, because they are in a high rise apartment with very, very limited space. But they were willing to prioritize the nutrition to the point where they got a little external mini freezer so they could portion out the food monthly and just put it in the bowl. So it took a little bit of effort up front to package that food, but then throughout the month it was really easy for them to feed. But they did prioritize that and find the space. So that is a concern. There's also a concern about just, do you have time to even do that? So again, all just a learning curve. So yeah, something to consider. It's not something you can decide to do and just start doing it the next day. You do have to put some forethought into it. And so that's a consideration people have to think of, is, do they have the time and the energy to think through that process? So for anybody who is sticking with kibble, again, this is not a judgmental conversation. some people have to stick with kibble, whether it's budget, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's that's the way you train. You know, I am NAPOPO certified. The way we train in the NAPOPO system is with existential food reward. That means what the dog needs to eat to survive daily. That is the food that you use to train throughout the day. And you know what stinks logistically is taking raw food and trying to train the dog with that food throughout the day because it's disgusting, it thaws, and you have to get creative with it. And that's
Yep.
actually a online workshop that I'm building right now to talk to people about this, as an intro, the importance of nutrition, where does it fall in the training paradigm in general, and then on the grand scheme of things, if everybody can do it, I want them to transition to using a fresh or raw food of some sort, transitioning away from kibble. But that poses a lot of problems, practically speaking. So, for training purposes, there is no arguing that kibble is the easiest thing to train with. You put it in the training pouch, it's not going bad, technically speaking. Technically, it actually is going rancid, but we won't get into that. So you put it in there and you toss them a food when they do the right thing. You can just like, I've got a baggie of food sitting right here for when I have dogs in the office and I'm training and I need to toss them a piece of food. So there's no arguing that. What you have to consider is, in general, kibble, because of how processed it's been, how many times it's been processed, it is subpar when it comes to what the dog is eating. If all you feed is a scoop from the bag of kibble and you plop it in the bowl and you don't do anything else with it, that is subpar. You need to do better to sort of bring the quality of that kibble up to something where the dog is, if all you're doing is feeding the kibble, all you are doing to your dog is making sure they don't die. They are meeting the minimum requirements to not die. That's literally what the standard is set at, is will the dog survive? What I want all my clients to be able to do, and what I want anybody listening or anybody who cares about dog nutrition in general, I want them to be able to take that kibble and supercharge it. So now the dog isn't just surviving, they're thriving, they're doing better. So we're going to do something to the kibble to bring it from this ultra processed, super dry food that's very hard to digest in general for the dogs. I'm going to bring it up to a level where it's easier to digest. Excuse me. And it has a higher moisture content. Oh, I hope I don't start coughing. And the
Don't
last thing
die.
I don't have COVID.
Just don't die during our interview.
I will. Yeah, I'll die afterwards. If I do, I'll make sure of that. So all right. So different things I recommend. First of all, I want everybody to feed a good quality kibble. And I have different rules for that, but real quickly, the basics are I want to see a lot of meat in the food, like real meat that you can identify. You know what animal it came from, and there's kind of maybe probably a lot of meat in there. So, what you should see is ideally, like the first massive amounts of ingredients are meat, but that's not necessarily the case. So, in my general rule, is the first and second ingredient needs to be meat, or the first and third ingredient needs to be meat. Something in the top three needs to be meat heavy. What I don't like to see when it comes to ingredients are a lot of plant-based protein. And
Hmm.
so when I say that, I'm talking about the peas, legumes in general, chickpeas, peas, tapioca. Those are probably the top three legumes that are put in dog food. And essentially, what they're doing is bumping up the level of protein while keeping their costs down, because peas are a lot cheaper than adding some more turkey or beef or whatever, the protein sources. So I want a good kibble that's high in meat based protein, and I want it to be as low as possible in carbohydrates and starches as possible. Carbs come in the form of plant matter in general, whether it's fruits, vegetables, grains, that's plant matter. The difficulty with kibble is in order for it to retain the actual shape of the kibble, whether it's a heart or a dog bone or a circle or an oval, whatever it is, for it to pop out of that extruder machine and maintain that shape, it needs to have carbohydrates and starches in there. So the carb level of kibble is naturally much, much higher than the dog really needs, just because that's what holds things together. You know, any baker will tell you you need you can't make a cake out of just meat. You can't make a meat cake patty. You know, this is really. Can you tell? I probably know less about cooking than I do about cars. So my analogies are really going
Good,
sideways around here.
good,
But
good to know. I'm not the only one that's just like I know a lot of dogs, but if you ask me what to do in this situation, I'm like I don't know what to do, man. I just know dogs.
yeah, somehow I'm touching on like the things that I don't know the most about in my analogies. I need to like rewrite them. But so that's what I want. I want a good kibble to start with. And for any of my clients, I do have a list of kibble that have sort of met my expectations. Some of my top favorites, just for anybody listening, is I love Origin. I like Farmina. They have two lines that I like. Farmina has a lot of different types of food. I call them lines, but the ones I like are the ancestral grains and the grain free. And not because it's grain free. I don't have any stance on grain versus grain free because it's all sort of a red herring in the first place. But I just like the ingredients though in those and nature's logic. Those are probably my top three. I'm trying to think off the list. Yeah, so top three kibbles. If anybody wants to know, that there they are. Even those, as good as those are, in my mind, they're still subpar because they've been subjected to heat and mixing and heat and mixing and heat and mixing in that order that many times. You know, most kibble processing plants, the food has been heated at least 3 times to high degrees. And again, you can go online and just see what nutrients have been damaged due to the heat and mixing and air. You know, it's hitting the air too. But so start with a good kibble, but now we have to supercharge it. So the top three things, in my opinion, that people need to do to just hit that baseline of now your dog is going to do better. You're going to see positive changes in their, you know, physical body and also in their behavior. Is the first thing you need to do is you need to add water. Add water to that dry kibble. You can flip the bag of food over and read how much moisture is in there, and it's painfully low on purpose because they're trying to make it shelf stable. You can't have watery food sitting in a bag and have it be shelf stable. So it's on purpose. But the dog's system is built to handle food, real food, which is approximately 70 to 80% moisture content, depending on what you're feeding. You know, raw chicken breast is like 75% moisture. And so the dog food is 10% or less, depending on the brand. So the best thing you can do, the cheapest thing you can do is add warm water to the bowl, let it sit for 5 minutes and get mushy, and then feed it to the dog. And the system will just say, like, thank goodness, you know, I have moisture needed for processing. You should, if your dog has, you know, bloating and gas and sort of just you can tell they don't feel good after they eat, that should help significantly. And if you want to help more, you can mash it up and make it mushy. The other thing that I recommend people do is add a really good digestive enzyme. So there are enzymes that a dog does not have that, in order to effectively digest the kibble and the ingredients that are in the kibble, they need some of those enzymes, and that's what a digestive enzyme does. Let me rephrase that because they came out so crazy. So in the bag of kibble, in the ingredients, there are things that are high in carbohydrates. To digest a carbohydrate, you need the enzyme amylase. Dogs do not have amylase in their saliva, and sort of that's what our system does. When we eat a vegetable, we eat a grain, we eat a piece of bread. As soon as we start chewing it, that starts the digestion process because the amylase enzyme starts breaking all that food down. The dog's food is high in carbohydrates, but they do not have that. So that food will not start breaking down all the way till it hits their pancreas, which is where some of the enzymes lie. Dogs do have some amylase, but it's not very much. So you can imagine this food that's high in carbs is having trouble getting broken down in the system. So adding a digestive enzyme will add amylase. Usually you can flip it over and you'll see like, oh look, there's amylase. It'll add good probiotics. It will add usually some flavoring so the dog will eat it. Most are in the form of a powder of some form or another. So you just put that on your dog's food. That's going to help the dog be able to break down everything that's in the kibble and access those nutrients. And
Hmm.
then the last thing I want people to add, and my recommendation for digestive enzymes, backing up a little bit, I love Volhard Dog Nutrition's digestive enzymes. I trust the company, I trust the ingredients, and I know they've done their part to maximize the impact that those enzymes will have. I want to say it's, I can't remember off the top of my head, like 30 to 40 bucks for a jar. And for the average dog, that's going to last 2 months or something. So you're just adding cents to the bowl. It's not a big deal. And then the last thing I want people to add, this is a specific product. It's Volhard Dog Nutrition. It's called an endurance blend. And what this does is all of the stuff that was likely damaged in the kibble while it was being processed, so particularly the amino acids, which is in protein, that stuff is highly susceptible to damage when subjected to heat. This product adds all of that back in. Excuse me. This is where you will see really positive changes in your dog's fur and coat, is you'll start to see it shine. And that's an indication that you're maximizing the nutrition that the dog is getting. Starting to die and do talking. No, for real, everybody, I do not have COVID. I cough all the time. Anybody who knows me is like, oh yeah, Lauren just coughs all the time. Uh, has a basis in environmental allergies, particularly dogs. I'm allergic to dogs, and so
The
the cough will
irony.
never go away. Yeah. So, all right. So, in summary, for that part, three things to sort of get your dog's kibble up to par: add water, add digestive enzymes, add that endurance blend. You'll find it if you go to Volhard Dog Nutrition's website. It's on there. There are, ooh, I'm going to mess up the brand, so I'm not going to say it. There is a similar product out there that I know some breeders use. It's the same idea. You're putting in a lot of fresh pressed amino acids in case the dog is not getting that from the ultra processed kibble. And then, so that's now your kibble's up to par. So now, if you want to supercharge it, this is the supercharging part. You've got to add fresh food. And there is science out there that it's limited in scope, but it basically points to the fact that any amount of fresh food that you can add to the dog's bowl will have positive impacts on the dog's disease state later in life. So whether they don't contract a disease, or whether if they do contract a disease, it's easier for them to fix it, or it drags on for a lot longer instead of killing the dog off quicker. Anyway, adding fresh food is really important. Some of my favorite fresh ingredients. The first is a boiled egg, just a plain old boiled egg. Boiled eggs are 100% digestible. That means if you only fed the dog a bowl of boiled eggs, they would never poop. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's basically the point. Is it can use almost every single thing in that egg. So for dogs who are extremely picky, for dogs who are sick, for dogs who just need help getting that boost to want to eat again, because sometimes dogs are so far back in their desire to eat, and it's not due to a health concern directly. You know, there's a lot of things that suppress appetite, but if it's just a behavioral thing where the dog doesn't want to eat, and they're not overweight. That's key. If your dog's overweight, it's probably not going to want to eat. It's not hungry. Okay, so give the dog a chance to eat. They don't eat, pick up the food. In a few days, the dog will eat. So I'm talking about the dogs who are usually underweight and just kind of have this failure to thrive type thing. They don't want to eat, but they need to eat at this point. Like they're getting malnourished. Boiled eggs are the ways that I fix that. Put a boiled egg in the food every day, every meal. I don't care. And the dog at least has that nutrition to start eating. And sometimes it'll jumpstart the dog's desire. I also usually, if I'm working with a dog like that, which I've had one before, we swap the diet over to something fresher. One of the benefits of fresh food is the dog needs to eat less of it in order to get its caloric requirements for the day. And some dogs just can't eat the volume of food that kibble needs you to eat. So that is, something to consider when comparing the diets. So anyway, boiled eggs are fantastic. Fatty cottage cheese, which you mentioned, that's an awesome one. Make sure I like double checking it doesn't have a billion preservatives in there. The Walmart brand, the Great Value brand, like just take a look at it. I was feeding it once and I just like looked at it and I was like, why does this cottage cheese have so many preservatives? Whereas like the other brand, I don't know what it is, doesn't have any. And I was like, oh, okay, well, a few cents more, I'll feed this one. It doesn't matter. I'm already spending a lot on dog food, so who cares?
Might as well.
So yeah. Other things, fresh fruits or fresh vegetables. Fruits are okay, but they're higher. I won't say that, but fresh vegetables have, in general, more vitamins and minerals for the dog, more bang for the buck. And there are studies out there testing the efficacy of green vegetables and orange and yellow vegetables. So those are the ones I tend to go for. The green ones being better. They're just denser, full of more nutrition, and we know that. Eat your spinach, not the corn or whatever.
Hmm.
So, if you feed vegetables to your dogs, you must steam them and or not purify. What's the word I'm looking for? Food process
Puree
it. You need
or
to
puree.
it needs yeah, thank you. You need to purify it. You should purify all food before you feed
Purify
dogs
and
nowadays.
steam it at the same time.
Yeah, that would be an interesting, very new, clean eating fad that would sweep the earth. You heard it here first, people.
I'll be
But
like, thanks, Lauren.
yeah. So you've got to steam it. You have to process it. You want it to look like baby food in order for the dog to be able to digest it. Again, because it comes down to the enzymes the dog does not have to be able to process that. So you're making it easier on the dog system. Some people buy baby food. If your baby didn't eat all of his peas, go ahead and put it on the dog food. Carrots, all the green, the spinach. My kid never liked the spinach one, so go ahead and put that on the dog food. It'll be a super good boost for them. I'm trying to think other things. You mentioned the fish. That's a really, really good option. Sardines and mackerel are fantastic options for dogs. You can feed them frozen. You can feed them from the can. Make sure they don't have any salt added. The dog doesn't need additional salt, so without that is much better. And other things I add. If you have any scraps of meat, that's a good thing to put on there. If you cook it, just don't put any spices on it for the dog.
Hmm.
So extra ground beef or turkey or chicken, all of that stuff is really good for the food. And just like one more category I usually talk about. Oh, hello, kefir. That's a fantastic one to add. For anybody who's unfamiliar with kefir, some people say kefir, tomato, it doesn't matter. You can get it in the yogurt section of most supermarkets. It's a fermented milk product. And what fermentation does is it allows the growth of good bacteria, so probiotics. So you're essentially adding live, fresh probiotics to the dog's food, which is fantastic. Coconut oil is, I think, a super popular additive for the food. Any fat you add to the dog's food, everybody listen. If you add fat to the dog's food, do it slowly, or you may have an explosion out to the end that you really don't want an explosion. So start slow, build up. They don't need a lot of extra fat, but it does have positive benefits that people can look into. But for most people, if the dog has skin issues, coconut oil is a good additive to put in the food. So, in summary about that, if you're feed kibble, feed a good kibble, add water, digestive enzyme, endurance blend, which is those amino acids, and then add fresh food. The dairy, vegetables, or meat. Think of it in those categories. So cottage cheese, kefir, whole milk, whole plain Greek yogurt is a good one. So whole milk yogurt. The vegetables, make sure to steam and purify slash puree them. And then any meat you want to add, any of the meat, boiled eggs are sort of one of the cheapest that you can add. Best bang for your buck for the most part. So,
Yeah.
uh,
What are your thoughts about bone broth?
oh yeah, bone broth is really it has a lot of benefits, and you can make it. There are some people who love making bone broth. I think that takes too much time, so I just spend the $2 in the soup aisle and I'll buy bone broth. So if people want to add, you know, you need to add a liquid to the food somehow, whether it's warm water or whether it's adding bone broth. To me, it doesn't matter. The difference is you want to be aware of the salt content that you're adding to your dog's food. So some foods are already extra salty. If anybody feeds a food that talks about urinary health, that usually has a lot of salt in it because they're trying to encourage the dog to hydrate more, which helps prevent crystals and stones. That's usually the reason a dog is eating that food. I usually don't recommend going that direction just because there is salt in there. Most commercials have salt. If you're concerned about that, make your own. There are recipes, you can find recipes anywhere.
Yeah,
So,
because I think also too people have to be careful when they pick out the broth or some people pick chicken broth just and I have to like say make sure it doesn't have like it's not like a chicken soup broth kind of thing where it has like onions and things like that because it's really hard. And actually my roommate she had a like I kind of adopted the cat but she kept it but we gave her kibble and she started having like those uterine infection and was just like having a hard time because of the salt and then like they switched her to raw and she hasn't had that issue ever since
yeah,
so
so that brings up a really interesting point. So first, I'm definitely not a cat person in the sense that I don't own one and I haven't done as much research into them. However, cats are obligate carnivores. Dogs are facultative carnivores. Cats must eat meat. They cannot in any way, shape, or form digest carbohydrates. If anybody has a cat, this is the one thing I know about cats other than their like I never know when I'm supposed to pet them or not. So that's one thing. But the other thing about cats is you must feed them canned food. You cannot feed cats kibble. Dry kibble is so bad for cats. And there's sort of a epidemic of dogs with thyroid issues. But when you look at the statistics when it comes to cats and thyroid issues, it is through the roof. There's some statistic I want to say it's like 76% of cats over the age 7 will have a thyroid problem, which is insane. So, exactly, yeah. Somebody said cats are way different than dogs. 100%, yeah. So, it goes back to the classification of them. Cats are obligate carnivores. That means they can derive all of the nutrients they need to live on a day to day basis from meat only and they must get it from meat only. They can't extract it from any other type of food, plant based materials. So now,
hmm
dogs, on the other hand, again, they're facultative carnivores. When you look at the scale of, make sure I'm in the screen, carnivore to omnivore, and I'm like, I can't figure out which way to go. Okay. So carnivore to omnivore, facultative carnivores are like, nope, this way. They're closer to carnivore. They're closer to cats than they are like us, basically.
yeah
So
yeah
yeah, that's what I know about cats. So that took off on a tangent, but yeah, they
I
need,
know
and
that.
that's why a raw diet for cats is the best thing you could bless them with, and they should. Like if you've got to choose between feeding your cat raw and your dog raw, go with the cat because biologically they need the raw food. Well,
Hmm.
they need the meat. They need the lack of carbohydrates, but
Right.
raw is better.
Yeah.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, for sure. I remember like my mom, she doesn't eat vegetables, and then like I had to cheat. I had to blend like bone broth. I threw in some berries, like raspberries, blueberries, spinach, carrot, and like a little bit of liver and like an eggshell, and I would just blend it, and then I mix it with the kibble. She was just like, "All right, I'll eat that," and it was just like,
Yeah.
I don't think it was it was as balanced as I theorized when I was making it, but I was just like, she's eating her vegetables, so she's not gonna get cancer, so it's totally fine.
Yeah. That's actually a really good tip for dogs who sort of turn their nose up at
Yeah.
vegetables. First of all, if you steam it and you puree it, so it's a mash, and you mix it with the kibble, they should not be able to pick it out. There are some
Hmm.
dogs who can. I have one who does that. He will eat all the pieces of kibble that have not touched, the extra. That's what he used to do. He's not eating kibble anymore. That's what he did. But what you can do is you can mix it up with a meat product of some sort. A lot of people will freeze these additives into cool little silicone molds. So they'll turn it into like a little frozen paw print, and it's like a spinach puree. So you make it, you pour it into the mold, which you can get from Amazon, put it in the freezer, and then every day they just drop, one or two little paw prints of frozen puree into the food. And that's an easy way to do it so you're not cooking for your dog every single day. Just make a batch in the blender, put it in the molds, freeze it, and now every day you just pop out two of those things. So that's an easy way to do it. When I was supercharging kibble, my pattern was usually in the morning they got dairy and vegetables, and I did the vegetables in various different ways. Usually I would just steam it beforehand in a batch and then store it somehow. And then dairy would just be whatever I had stored in the fridge, whether it was kefir, a scoop of uh, cottage cheese, and then in the evening they would get some sort of meat. That was usually my recommendation to people for how to supercharge the kibble, just to sort of be able to rotate things and have some sort of structure so they felt comfortable with the variety. The rule I sort of give people is you want to keep the total amount of added food to the kibble less than 20% of their total daily amount of food. And this is a rough rule. You can really nitpick the rule, but if your dog eats a cup of food per meal, take out about a fifth of a cup, put it back in the bag, and then you can add a fifth of a cup of those mixtures. We don't want the dogs getting fatter because we're adding stuff, so you've got to take out some of the kibble. The point of that rule is to help prevent all the nutrients from getting unbalanced, essentially. We want to make sure they're still getting their daily needs as far as their vitamins, minerals, macronutrients, and then this is just a fresh source of food that the body just sort of is like, oh, relief. Like I recognize this. This is so easy for me to digest. Let me get some fresh forms of these macro and micronutrients. So that's the rule I sort of live by. Depending on the nutritionist you talk to, those rules bend a little bit. It depends really to do it correctly, you have to analyze exactly what kibble you're feeding, break down those nutrients, subtract the amount that you're taking away, and make sure that what you're adding complements what's already in the bag of food. That's the correct way to do it. All right. But the average person, if I tell them that they have to analyze, they're not going to add fresh food to their dog's bowl. So if we stick with 20%, we're going to make sure the dogs don't get fatter and they're going to get a fresh source of food. And it's a safe amount to add without worrying about it getting unbalanced. That's sort of the rule I pass on. So
Hmm. Now, like, what were your thoughts about like? I know we were talking about this when you were presenting, but what are your thoughts about switching like the proteins and just switching like maybe was it brands or is it just different kind of
yeah,
foods with the same brand? Like just
all of the above.
just
Yeah.
just like what are your thoughts with that?
Yes. So the best thing, one of the best things, I keep saying the best thing you can do. Well, all of these things are really good. do some of them, do all of them. Anything that you do is better than doing nothing. But as far as rotating foods, variety is key in making sure that your dog's digestive system stays robust and stays tough. When we train dogs, we don't want sissy dogs. You don't want dogs that you know, don't want to work. We want dogs who are tough, and we want their internal system to be tough as well. And the health of the gut is directly linked to the health of the dog's immune system. And that has to do with their ability to fight diseases, has to do with the body reacting inappropriately to allergens. So, for some dogs who have chronic allergy problems, it could be due to a problem in the gut microbiome. And there are tests out there you can purchase, send in the sample, and they'll tell you exactly what's going on in your dog's gut microbiome, and you can actually work to sort of patch up the holes and stuff. It's really cool. But variety is the best way to just make sure the dog's system is staying robust. So my rule that I have on the handout I give people is rotate foods after every bag of food is gone. So if you're feeding kibble, you get down to the bottom, rotate it out, and pick a different one. I don't care if it's same brand, different flavor, different brand, same flavor, or different brand, different flavor. You're going to go through them all. And what you'll find is in the beginning, people will have to follow the classic rule of slowly transition the dog over several days, 7 to 10 days, depending on the dog. What you'll find is after so many periods of swapping, you won't have to do that transition anymore. The reason dogs have to transition so carefully is because their system doesn't have the bacteria in there it needs to break down whatever is in that food. It's not used to it. It's like if we ate pizza every single day and all of a sudden somebody handed us a hamburger, our body would be like, heck no, don't know what that is. And that's why we, go overseas and have food from a different country and our system doesn't know what to do with it. It's because we don't have the gut microbiome to be able to handle that food. So we want to strengthen the dog system by rotating that stuff in and out. So you're going to rotate kibble, again, brands and flavors, just every single time, variety. And that makes the dog happy too. They want to eat different stuff. And as you do that, you can have a variety of different fresh things that you add also. So you're going to change up what dairy, what vegetables, and what meats are you adding to supercharge the kibble. So lots of different ways to sort of add that variety in there. But yeah, super good point is that's definitely key to making sure the dog is interested in the food and they're getting a wide assortment of just nutrition in general. And an important thing to consider is every bag of food, even though it's balanced, complete and balanced is the term, each food still has slightly more and less ingredients in each category. So, the vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin D levels, E levels, not vitamin D, but, they're all different levels in that bag of kibble. And so swapping through the kibbles will make sure that you don't get an excess or deficiency in certain categories. And so it just protects your dog. Uh, Science Diet had a huge recall for having extreme excess levels of vitamin D, and that's deadly to the dog. Dogs were dying because of that. And if somebody had rotated bags of food, it's likely the dog wouldn't have had an internal excess storage of vitamin D because they weren't on that bag of food for longer than it took to get through that bag. So it protects the dog as well.
Hmm. I think you got a big question here
Yeah.
from my client. She's a the backstory with her. She has had cats for so long, and then they decided they got a dog. And it's like a
Mm-hmm.
small Chihuahua mix, and so might make our dog's food with brown white rice mix, carrot, peas, spinach, sweet potato, blueberries, chicken or ground beef. Sometimes adding small amounts of the liver, pump of salmon oil daily too. He has allergies, skin problems badly, and on meds. Think he may need gut support. How can I add that?
Okay, so super good question, and I'm going to break it down sort of into two answers. The first is because you're making the recipe yourself, I'm not sure what may or may not be missing in that food. And so, my recommendation for anybody who wants to make their own food is to contact a canine nutritionist, certified canine nutritionist, and they will custom create a recipe card for your dogs. And you can just follow that. And you can say, hey, I shop at Walmart, I shop at Winn Dixie. I have no clue what's in what kind of grocery stores in your area. But these are the stores I have access to, and they will make sure that their ingredients are something that you can get your hands on. So that's really, really nice. It costs, it depends on the nutritionist, but 150 $250, and they'll create those recipe cards for you. Then you can go out, you can purchase those ingredients, and you can make the food with confidence, knowing that it's complete and balanced, custom made for your dog. That will sort of cover all the baselines, because without knowing if the food is complete and balanced, we don't know if the dog is having allergy or skin issues because of deficiency in the food. We also don't know if there's an excess in the food. We don't know, maybe is there an ingredient that's inflammatory for the dog and it's causing those. So when you contact the nutritionist, you can say, hey, my dog has such and such allergies, or these are the allergies we're seeing, and they'll make sure to include ingredients that are hypoallergenic. So that's a good baseline to start with your dog. Then,
I
as far as gut support, so you can talk about that with them too, and they'll make sure to include that. Gut support is something that you can add on top of any food, whatever you're feeding right now. You can improve it adding a digestive enzyme, and that's the gut support that she's sort of referencing.
hmm
So again, those digestive enzymes, and I really like the one from Volhard Dog Nutrition. It's just called Volhard Dog Nutrition Digestive Enzymes. It has a cute picture of the dog on it, but that has a
hmm
lot of pre and probiotics in there, along with enzymes that will help the dog eat whatever food they're already eating. So that's an easy way to add those. And again, it comes in a jar. It's a powder with a little scooper in there, and just based on your dog's size, you add the appropriate amount of the scoop and put it on top of the food. Hi, Aki.
he's
Very welcome.
they're all just wrestling, and he's just making all these weird chihuahua noises. I'm just like, I'm just gonna pick you up because I don't want you. You just like somewhat kind of distracted me, but
Mhm.
yeah, you little fatty. A little bit of diet plan. Mm, boy.
He's like, this is the lady that took away my food. I don't want to talk to her.
I know. Yeah, you. It's fine. It's fine. You give you give him a treat, he'll be your best friend forever. Like we go to this this raw diet dog store in San Francisco, and that's where I get like my mackerel. I get my sardine, and they get it from like organic, like kill humanely kind of thing, and like we'll get
Mhm.
frozen whole mackerel, we'll get like whole sardine, and they love it.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
they'll give out like free samples of like the freeze dried things, and this dog just sat there while she was giving them out, like a few pieces to him, and he would not come back to me. He would just like look at me, just look back at her like, can I
I
stay with
am going
you?
to this person. Yeah.
Just like, I can live here, I'll she can bring her to work, I'll go to work with her, that's totally fine.
Yeah. I'm
uh
out.
it's it's so funny. There's one more question I think we'll recap and then we'll wrap it up, but is from me, like what do you do with dogs that just won't eat, or just have like that, or just have like that, maybe I'll eat maybe once every 3 days, or just don't have an appetite. I know several clients, like I know a Pomsky and I know a Husky that don't really eat.
Okay, so I was gonna say it depends on breed, because there are a few questions I have in my mind when I get a dog like that, or I'm talking to somebody with a dog who's picky about their food. And the questions that pop in my mind is, what breed are they? Because I want to know, is this normal or not? If there's a Labrador Retriever who's being picky with their food, that's way different to me than Husky who's being picky with their food. Labs will eat all day and all night, and they will always tell you they're still hungry. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
generally who they are. Whereas a husky is naturally more picky. They have um, different metabolisms. They're a little bit different because, well, I won't go into the why, but they're different. You know, husky being picky to me is relatively normal. Then I want to know, sort of my follow up question is, how old is the dog? What have health issues been ruled out? Has the dog gone to the vet and been checked out and at least gotten a rudimentary thumbs up that, yeah, we can't really find anything initially that's wrong with the dog? And then after that, if all those questions are answered and we still have a lab who's healthy but picky, my next question is, how fat are they? Basically, is what it comes down to. If a dog is overweight, they are not hungry, and well, I should say, there are a lot of dogs who are overweight and they will continue to eat and never complain. And that's fine. That's a conversation I need to have with the owner. If I have a dog who's a little bit overweight and they're being picky, they are trying to communicate as much as possible to the owners. I don't want any more food. And the vicious cycle that starts happening is the owner worries that, oh no, my dog isn't eating. And really, it's just because the dog isn't hungry. But then they add stuff to the food. So then they add the gravy and they add the canned food. And now the dog is basically pressured into eating the food because how can they refuse the gravy that was just added? And it ends up being this vicious cycle of the dog getting calories it doesn't need, the dog getting fatter, the appetite being suppressed more, but then the people worrying that the dogs aren't eating, so now let me add the filet mignon. And it ends up this vicious cycle, essentially where the problem was the dog was overweight in the first place. The dogs that I worry about are the ones I mentioned earlier who don't have an appetite, but they're underweight. And those are the dogs who are malnourished. And usually you have to bribe them with anything, hopefully with high quality food that they've never had before. So it's super appetizing. You want calorie dense food so that the three mouthfuls you maybe can convince them to eat is enough to start jump starting the system. And that's sort of what you're looking for is high impact food to jump start the system so they eat. Anyway, so if there's no medical issues, if the dog is a correct weight, then all we're left with is a dog who's behaviorally picky. They've learned to manipulate the owners because if they don't eat, in 15 minutes, somebody's going to now add shredded cheese to that food, and now the dog's going to go eat. Or the next time they refuse to eat, oh, they don't want the shredded cheese. They want, the leftover chicken, shredded chicken from tacos yesterday. They want that added. And they learn behaviorally that if they refuse the food initially, the food will get more value and then they'll go eat it. So those are
Mm.
behavioral cases. And I am so strict with those cases because it's just behavior. There's no medical reason, there's no health reason behind it. We have to nip it in the bud. So you take the food. If it's supercharged kibble, that's fine. Supercharge it, but stick with that. Don't add extra goodies, so to speak. Add the kibble, put it on the ground. The dog has 5 minutes to eat. If they don't eat, you pick up the food and you put it away. That's it. Seal it up, put it in the refrigerator if it has additives. If you leave it out, it's gonna spoil because it has real food in it and you have to dump it out. After a few days of being strict like that, and if the dog doesn't touch it at all, they don't eat for 24 hours. So I'll wait until the next day. So if they skip breakfast, if they say no thank you on breakfast, I say fine, you're going to wait till next breakfast. And usually if you wait 24 hours, the dog will eat a few mouthfuls. The moment they walk away, I pick up the food, put it away. Essentially, they've got to learn. I feel like I should be talking to myself because like this is my son at dinner. Like we're constantly trying to drive him. But the point is, I feel like I'm getting like a life lesson here, which I know, but it's hard to follow through with a child who throws a tantrum. But
Sure.
the idea is you put the food down. The dog needs to eat of its own ignition, decide that it's hungry, it needs to get this food in order to survive. And that mechanism will kick in quickly. As soon as the dog gets hangry, they feel hungry, and some dogs haven't felt that in a long time, if ever. When they feel hungry, they will eat, and that's why the disclaimer, the dog has to be healthy enough to pull this off. If there's an underlying medical issue, this isn't going to work and you're going to be damaging the dog. But if we've got just a manipulative, picky, otherwise healthy dog, that's what I do. Is tough love. Sorry, buddy, you basically told me my food was yucky that I just made you for dinner, so you're not eating. Maybe you'll eat tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, then the next day. And every dog I've had who's been picky that didn't have an underlying medical issue, within 3 to 4 days, they're eating their entire bowl of food as soon as I put it down in 5 minutes. And I do this for dogs who pick up their food and they carry it somewhere else and eat it somewhere else, because 70% of my clients are eating a raw food of some sort. So that's disgusting. Even if everybody's fed in their kennel here, I don't want that food coming out of the bowl. So if that happens, I take it away immediately. That
Hmm.
food needs to stay in the bowl. So it comes down to essentially positive reinforcement, giving the dog their food. They choose to not follow the rules, whether it's by saying, "See ya, I don't like your food is yucky," or by taking it out of the bowl. Then I use negative punishment, which is taking that food away and saying, "Sorry, the restaurant is closed. You do not get this food anymore." And they learn quick. As soon as those hunger pangs hit, as soon as they're actually hungry, you wouldn't believe like how quickly dogs are willing to work for you,
Oh,
so
I no. If I get hungry, I'll jump over hoops of
I
fire or things
agree.
like that. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just crazy that I guess so. My OCD kicks in as soon as like I see a bowl unattended, like just left out with food, and like they say they free feed, and I'm just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I compare it to like how your situation with your kid, like if you cook some vegetables for your kid and your kid did not want to eat it, you're not going to leave it out there for like 7 hours to think that he'll come back, right? I come from I come from a third world kind of family. So third world people are very like, if you don't eat, you don't eat at all. So that's sort of how
Exactly.
I
That's
approach
the
with
mindset
dogs.
you should have with the dogs. Exactly. It's not, okay, you didn't want the tacos, let me make you macaroni and cheese or whatever. It's, we're having tacos for dinner. I haven't quite, I've done that. Whatever we make for dinner is what we're having for dinner. So I give myself a little bit of credit, but man, dinner time is a battle. Anybody who has kids out there, I think they know what I'm talking about. But um, yeah, you touched on a point about the free feeding, and that's another question I have in my mind is, if the dog's picky, it could be they just legitimately don't have the understanding that food is valuable. Dogs who have access to food all the time, to them, it's like the piece of furniture. Like, it's always there. It's always there for them to use and have access to whenever they want. So why would they value it? It's not that they're trying to be snooty. It's they literally have no concept of the food being taken away. It's always available. And besides that, the food's going rancid. So a lot of foods are
Hmm.
sprayed with omegas, omega 3, omega 6s, um, fish oil. People add fish oil and stuff. That food is going bad. That's anytime oxygen touches those types of fats or fats in general, they're going to go rancid. So don't leave your
Yeah,
dog's food out because it'll go bad, and the dog's gonna sort of just treat it like something that's not valuable to them. And I know you talk about this with your clients, but you miss out on a valuable training opportunity. And that's not
Hmm.
even for people who like carry food around and toss it at their dogs. Even if you still feed 2 meals a day, that is a 30-second training opportunity, depending on where the dog is at training, that you can use to reinforce, I am providing you this food. You need to do something to earn it. Now here's your food. And you miss out on that if if the food is down. So I know
Oh yeah,
that's
no, yeah, no,
for you.
no. You read my mind. I was totally gonna say something like that, and then you took the words right out of my mouth just because it's just like I want the dogs to just know that most good things come from me, and then just like I provide the food. It's just like, yeah, I'm sure if you ask your kid, hey, do you want you want me to make you a hamburger, or like you want your glass of milk? It'd be weird that like I don't know, your 1 year old kid just goes and grabs it from the shelf fridge and open it and get it themselves. It's just like um they're you want them to be dependent on you in that context versus just like, no, I don't need you. I can get this myself.
Right. And learn to say please, like just please. That's kind of all we want the dogs to do is like sit down at the dinner table, say please and thank you, and that's it. Like it, it seems like a lofty expectation depending on where the dog is at a training, but when you break it down, that's the standard. Like the dog needs to say please, thank you, and just be respectful and polite. That's sort of what we're going for with pet dog training. So
Right.
um, yeah.
Yeah. So uh yeah, you got any last comments or remarks or any purifying that you want to suggest?
Vegetable purification over here at Ideal Dog. No, I think that's it. For anybody who may have a particularly difficult case or dog and you want to talk more, I do offer virtual diet consultation. So that's something people can reach out to me for. I am always willing to talk about dog nutrition because again, it's that foundational thing that most people can improve upon in some way, shape, or fashion. May not be switching entirely to raw, may not be forking out, the second mortgage for dog food. It could just be adding a little bit to the kibble every day, and you'll see positive changes in the dog, behaviorally, physically. And if you don't see it, you can be confident knowing that it is going on under there. Just like when we start eating better, we feel better. It may not look any different, it would be awesome if it did, but but that there are positive changes going on internally. So I hope everybody, at least after listening, that's something that at least stands out in their mind. I want it to sort of be a thorn in their mind as to something that, hey, maybe I should just spend a few minutes looking into, or maybe I need to think about this a little more next time I need to buy the dog's bag of food or whatever. I just want it to be a little bit more of a priority and just get a little more education out there about it.
Yeah, and then to like all the clients that are listening or anyone that's watching, if you have any questions after the live, just hit us up and we'll be happy to answer questions. But also just give it a try. It's not when you're gonna figure out nutrition for your dog, it's gonna be a little bit of a process. And if you need help, do what Lauren said, like go for a consultation with her, or maybe go find a dog nutritionist to help you out and find those recipes. And because there's so many options out there, it's scary to make a decision. So um, but yeah, I would say just recap, just find find what works for you guys, whether it's cost or convenience. And Lauren was pretty on the mark with everything that she said. And also, if you have kibble, add some fun things like the purified steamed vegetable puree, the vegetables, the cottage cheese, a little bit of some meat, maybe like a chicken neck or something to clean the teeth, and just cottage cheese. Just really make a difference because your dog is going to be thanking you, and your dog is going to live longer. And Ronnie Habib was saying in his research that vegetables, if you add a little bit in the dog food every day, your chances of your dog getting cancer is going to be dropped by a lot because that vegetables are going to get rid of that insulin that's going to feed the cancer. So I think that's a really big thing. But yeah, uh, yeah, guys, if you are in Lauren's area, if you need a dog trainer, need a consult for nutrition, definitely hit her up. Or just now, I know she offered virtual nutrition talk. Definitely utilize that. Yeah, and then yeah, thank you guys for those that watched, commented, and I'm gonna put this on YouTube too, and I'm sure I'll probably get you to send me your links, so then I'll put it on the YouTube, so then people can click that. And yeah, Lauren, thank you for so much for talking almost 2 hours with me about this. Well, you're very passionate about it, so I don't think this was work for you at all.
No, it's pretty easy for me to chat about something like this. Anybody who knows me knows that this is pretty common. So, but yeah, thanks for having me on, Kevin. I appreciate chatting, and like you said, if anybody has additional questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll tag me, find me, set up a diet consultation, whatever. I really am always open to helping people regarding this topic because it has such positive ramifications throughout everything: dog's behavior, the way the dog acts, the way the dog feels, etc. So
For sure. All right, guys, we're gonna end the broadcast right here. Thank you for those that tuned in, and yeah, I think I got 2 more, 3 more. So stay tuned for those interviews, and hope everyone has a good day. Thank you so much, Lauren.
yeah, no problem. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
All right, peace.